Welcome back to Echoes of Ihsan, the show where we explore the depths of Islamic spirituality.
Yes, and today
We're
we're
taking a deep dive.
going really deep into Imam al-Ghazali's Ihya Ulum Din.
Yes, Volume 3.
Volume 3, The Book of Destructive Evils.
Exactly, and it's,
Which sounds a little scary, to be honest.
well, it's a pretty intense topic.
Yeah.
We're going to be talking about the human soul and its attributes, and what's fascinating is that al-Ghazali doesn't just give us a set of rules or rituals.
It's not a to-do list.
It's not a checklist. No, he takes us on this inner journey to explore, like, who we really are. What shapes our thoughts, our actions.
It's all about what's going on the inside.
Exactly, the inner workings.
Yeah, so we're not just talking about dry theological concepts here.
No, not at all.
We're talking about understanding ourselves better.
Yeah, self-knowledge.
Yeah, those inner struggles we all face.
And how to kind of navigate those.
Right, finding a path.
Yeah, on this path of spiritual growth.
Exactly, it's like he's giving us a spiritual map.
I love that, a spiritual map. I like that.
Yeah, to guide us through all the
the ups and downs.
The complexities.
Yeah, of our inner landscape. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, and so he starts by defining the soul, but not in a simple way.
Okay, so we're not just talking about the soul.
No.
There's more to it.
There's layers to this.
Okay, so how does he define the soul?
Well, he uses 3 terms, actually.
Okay.
Qalb, ruh, and nafs.
Okay, so 3 different aspects.
3 dimensions of the soul.
Each one highlights a different facet.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Break it down for us.
All right, let's start with qalb.
Okay.
Which literally means heart.
Okay.
But we're not just talking about the physical organ here.
Right, not just the pump?
No, not the blood pumper, no.
Right, okay.
In Islamic spirituality, the heart is seen as the seat of the soul.
Oh, okay.
Like the core of our being.
The essence, where our deepest emotions, our intuitions, and our connection with the divine resides.
So it's like this meeting point between the physical and the spiritual.
You got it.
The place where our earthly experiences and our divine connection converge.
I like that. That's beautifully put.
Okay, so that's qalb. What about ruh?
Okay, so ruh means spirit.
Okay.
This refers to the immaterial essence that animates our bodies.
Okay, so it's like the breath of life, the thing that makes us alive.
Yes, exactly, the animating force.
Right. Okay.
And it's also what connects us back to the divine source.
So if I'm understanding this correctly, the ruh is kind of like that spark of divinity within us.
Yes.
That connection to the transcendent realm.
Yes.
That sets us apart from other creatures.
Precisely, that yearning for meaning, purpose.
That longing for something more.
Exactly, for connection with something greater than ourselves.
Okay, so that's ruh.
Yeah.
What about nafs?
Okay, so nafs is a little bit trickier.
Okay.
Because it's often translated as self or ego.
Right.
But it's a lot more than that.
Oh.
It includes our desires, our impulses.
Our lower instincts.
Exactly, those base desires.
Right.
It's that part of us that's driven by worldly attachments.
So like the need to survive, to be comfortable, to have things.
Exactly, self-preservation.
Okay, so the nafs is kind of like that wild card in all of this.
I like that analogy, yeah.
It's got the potential for both good and evil.
Absolutely, it's a double-edged sword.
Depending on whether it's guided by the higher principles of the qalb and the ruh,
Yes.
or just by its own kind of base desires.
Yeah, it can pull us in different directions.
So it's constantly pulling us, like a tug of war.
Yes, that's a great way to think about it.
Between what we know is right and what we might just feel like doing.
It's the source of our temptations.
Yeah, those urges that we sometimes have to resist.
Exactly, those egotistical tendencies.
Like wanting to have the last word or to be right all the time.
Yes, and those attachments to the fleeting pleasures of this world.
It's so easy to get caught up in that.
It is. It's a constant struggle.
But it's also the seed of our willpower, right?
Absolutely.
Our capacity for growth.
Yes, our ability to choose between right and wrong.
So it's not all bad.
No, not at all. It has potential for great good.
Okay, so we've got these 3 dimensions of the soul. The qalb, the spiritual heart.
Yes.
The ruh, that divine spark within us.
Right.
And the nafs, that ego.
Yeah, the ego with all its complexity.
With its potential for both good and evil. Yeah, how do these 3 actually interact with each other?
It's like they're these interconnected layers.
Okay.
So imagine the qalb, the heart, as the core.
The innermost circle.
Exactly, where our deepest intuitions reside.
Okay.
And then surrounding that, you have the ruh.
The spirit.
Yeah, that animates us and guides us towards our higher purpose.
And then encompassing both the heart and the spirit.
Yes.
Is the nafs.
Yeah.
The ego.
Right, and it acts as the intermediary.
So it's like the nafs is the filter through which we experience the world.
That's a good way to put it.
And its purity or impurity, I guess, determines how clearly we can perceive the guidance of the Ruh and the wisdom of the Qalb.
Absolutely.
So if our nafs is clouded with those negative qualities, the greed, the envy, the anger,
the arrogance,
it's like
it distorts our perception.
It's like trying to see through a dirty window.
Exactly.
You might be able to make out the shapes, but the view is never going to be clear until that glass is clean.
That's a perfect analogy, yeah.
But when the nafs is purified through spiritual practices and virtuous actions,
it becomes transparent, allowing the light to shine through.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah.
So it becomes a clear vessel, allowing that light of the divine to shine through. So this has given me a whole new perspective on self-improvement.
How so?
Well, it's not just about developing good habits or achieving goals.
Right.
It's about purifying the very core of our being.
Yes.
The nafs.
Exactly.
So that we can actually align ourselves with our higher purpose.
That's a profound insight, and it brings us to another fascinating concept that al-Ghazali explores.
Okay, let's hear it.
The idea that the human soul is a microcosm of the universe.
Ooh, okay, what does that mean?
Well, al-Ghazali argues that just as the universe reflects the attributes of God, so too does the human soul.
So we're not just tiny specks in this vast cosmos.
No.
We're like mini universes reflecting the very essence of the divine.
That's the idea, yeah?
That's a mind-blowing concept.
It has profound implications for how we view ourselves and our place in the world.
Yeah.
It means that we have within us the potential for immense good.
Right.
And immense evil.
Oh, wow.
We have the capacity for love, compassion, wisdom, and creativity.
Right, but also for the opposite.
But also for greed, hatred, ignorance, destruction.
So it's like this constant tightrope walk between these two polarities.
Yes.
Constantly navigating the choices that will lead us towards one or the other.
And that's where al-Ghazali's guidance becomes so crucial.
Right, because it can feel overwhelming.
Yeah.
To think about all that potential for both good and bad within us.
He provides us with a roadmap, you know, for purifying the nafs, for cultivating those qualities that reflect the divine attributes, and for overcoming those destructive forces that lead us astray.
So how do we even begin to identify those aspects of ourselves that need purification and those that need to be nurtured?
Well, to illustrate this concept, al-Ghazali delves into the 4 different natures that can manifest in the soul. Angelic, animalistic, devilish.
Okay, so 4 different natures of the soul.
He's not saying that we are angels or devils, but rather that we have the capacity to act in ways that align with these different natures.
So we're not just one thing.
No.
We're not good or bad.
We have the potential for all of it.
And it's more about recognizing which nature is driving our actions at any given time.
Exactly, and understanding how these different natures play out in our thoughts, emotions, and actions.
Okay, I like that.
So, for example, the angelic nature is inclined towards knowledge, purity, and closeness to God.
So that's like that voice inside us that's always urging us to do the right thing.
Yes.
To be kind, to be compassionate, to seek a higher purpose.
Precisely.
What about the animalistic nature?
Well, that one's focused on fulfilling those basic desires: food, sleep, reproduction, self-preservation. Not inherently bad, of course. We need those things to survive.
Yeah.
But when unchecked, it can lead to excess.
Right. Indulgence. Yeah.
Overindulgence. Yeah.
Losing sight of the bigger picture.
Exactly. Focusing on those worldly pleasures at the expense of spiritual growth.
Okay. So that's the animalistic nature.
Yes.
And then there's the devilish nature.
Right. Characterized by deception, envy, arrogance.
Pulling us away from God.
Exactly. It's the source of those negative thoughts and impulses.
That tempt us towards wrongdoing.
Right.
It's like that classic depiction of a devil on our shoulder whispering in our ear.
Yeah, trying to lead us astray.
Trying to tempt us.
Yeah.
And then there's the human nature.
Right. So we have the potential for all of these.
It's like a cosmic drama playing out within each of us.
Absolutely. It's a battleground.
And the choices we make determine which force prevails.
Exactly. The thoughts we entertain, the actions we take.
It's empowering to think that we have that choice.
Absolutely. We have agency.
Yeah.
And this brings us to the concept of knowledge.
Okay, so we've got these different forces.
Yes.
What's the role of knowledge in all of this?
Well, al-Ghazali sees knowledge as the soul's primary function.
Oh, okay.
It's the path to understanding God's will.
Okay.
And drawing closer to him.
So it's not just about accumulating facts.
No.
It's about something deeper.
It's about transforming the soul.
Okay, so how do we go about gaining this kind of knowledge?
Welcome back to Echoes of Ihsan. We were talking about the concept of knowledge. It's fascinating how al-Ghazali presents this idea that knowledge isn't just accumulating facts, it's a path for the soul itself.
Yeah, it's not just about knowing things. It's about transforming our souls, becoming better versions of ourselves. So how do we actually go about gaining this kind of knowledge? Does he lay out like a specific method?
He does. He talks about 3 modes of acquiring knowledge: ilm, kashf, and something he calls learning by thinking.
Okay, those are some interesting terms. What is ilm?
Ilm is often translated as inspiration and refers to knowledge that comes directly from God.
Oh, wow. So it's like a divine gift.
Exactly. It's a sudden flash of insight, a deep knowing that bypasses the usual routes of study or reasoning.
I think I've experienced that before. Like when a solution to a problem suddenly pops into your head.
Yes. Think of the prophets receiving revelations or a scientist having a breakthrough idea seemingly out of nowhere. That sudden clarity, that's the essence of ilm.
That's fascinating. So what about kashf? How is that different from ilm?
Kashf, meaning unveiling, builds upon that sense of revelation. It's knowledge that comes through spiritual experiences.
Okay.
Visions, dreams, or through dedicated spiritual practices like meditation or deep prayer. It's a more gradual unveiling of truth, often accompanied by heightened awareness and deeper insights into the nature of reality.
So while ilham is like a sudden burst of light, kashf is like a steady sunrise.
A beautiful way to put it. Imagine a veil being slowly lifted, revealing a hidden landscape. That's the imagery associated with kashf. It's a journey of spiritual discovery where layers of understanding are peeled away through spiritual practices and experiences.
Both of those sound incredible, but maybe also a bit out of reach for the average person. What about this learning by thinking that al-Ghazali talks about? That sounds a little more accessible.
You're right. It's the path most familiar to us. This mode involves the more traditional methods of seeking knowledge, like studying scriptures, engaging in intellectual discourse, observing the natural world.
Oh, okay. So using our minds to learn about God.
Exactly. Reflecting on God's creation. All those things that challenge our minds and expand our understanding.
It's not about rejecting reason or intellect, but using them as tools for spiritual growth.
Precisely. Al-Ghazali emphasized a balanced approach. He recognized the value of both revelation and reason.
Okay, I like that. Using both our hearts and our minds on this journey. But even with all these paths to knowledge, it doesn't seem easy. Are there challenges or obstacles that we need to be aware of?
Absolutely. Al-Ghazali was keenly aware of the challenges we face in our quest for knowledge. He identified 5 key obstacles that can hinder our progress, and they're surprisingly relevant to our lives today.
I'm sure some things are universal across time, especially when it comes to the human condition. What's the first obstacle he mentions?
He starts with the impurities of the soul.
Okay.
Those negative qualities that cloud our judgment and prevent us from seeing things clearly. Things like arrogance, envy, greed.
Anger,
all those things that distort our perception and lead us to make decisions that are in our best interest.
Yeah, I could definitely see how those things would get in the way of spiritual growth.
It's like trying to see through a dirty window. You might be able to make out some shapes, but the view is never going to be clear until you clean the glass.
Yeah, I get that. So what's the second obstacle?
He then talks about natural defects.
Okay, what does he mean by that?
Limitations in our intellect or understanding that can make it difficult to grasp certain concepts.
So some people might just have a harder time understanding certain things than others.
Exactly. These are things that are often beyond our control.
Okay, that makes sense. What about the third obstacle?
He then points to lack of focus as a major impediment to gaining knowledge. Now, this was a challenge even in his time, but it's something we can all relate to in our modern world of constant distractions.
Oh, absolutely. Our attention spans are constantly being bombarded by notifications, news feeds, and the endless stream of information. It's hard to focus on anything for too long.
Right. And al-Ghazali recognized the importance of cultivating focus and concentration.
Yeah, that makes sense. We need to be intentional about creating space for learning and reflection.
Exactly. And that leads us to the next obstacle, external distractions.
Oh yeah, those are everywhere these days.
In al-Ghazali's time, these might have been social pressures, political turmoil, or the demands of daily life. For us, it's often the 204/7 news cycle, the addictive nature of social media.
The pressure to be constantly connected.
Exactly. It can be incredibly difficult to find that stillness and clarity we need to truly connect with ourselves and with the divine.
So how do we combat those distractions?
Al-Ghazali emphasized the importance of creating boundaries. prioritizing those practices that nourish our souls and protect our inner space from the onslaught of external distractions.
Yeah, that makes sense. Creating those boundaries and sticking to them.
Exactly. And then the final obstacle, perhaps the most straightforward, but also the one that underpins all the others: ignorance.
Ignorance.
And he's not using this term in a pejorative way to suggest that people are stupid or unintelligent. He's simply acknowledging that we all start from a place of not knowing.
Oh, okay. We all have things to learn.
Exactly. And that overcoming ignorance requires a willingness to learn, to question, and to seek knowledge.
So it's about having that humility to admit that we don't know everything and being open to learning from others.
Precisely. Al-Ghazali saw ignorance as a natural part of the human condition, something to be overcome through education, experience, and a sincere desire to learn and grow.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here, exploring the nature of the soul, the paths to knowledge, and those obstacles we might encounter on that journey.
Yes, and it's all connected. All of this lays the groundwork for understanding those destructive evils that Al-Ghazali so vividly portrays in this volume.
Right, those destructive evils that we talked about at the beginning of the episode.
They're like the ultimate embodiment of those obstacles, those forces that actively work against our spiritual progress.
Okay, so now let's dive into those. What are they? How do they impact us?
Welcome back to Echoes of Ihsan. We spent the last two parts talking about the human soul, how we gain knowledge, and the obstacles we face on the spiritual path. Now we're finally going to delve into those destructive evils that Al-Ghazali outlines in this volume.
Yeah, the Book of Destructive Evils. I have to say, it's a pretty intense title.
It is. It's meant to grab our attention, I think, to really emphasize the danger of these inner forces that can sabotage our spiritual progress. He even uses the phrase, the devil's whispers, to describe how these evils operate.
The devil's whispers. Oh, wow. So it's like these insidious suggestions constantly tempting us to do the wrong thing.
Exactly. Whispering in our ear, trying to lead us astray. If we're not vigilant, it's easy to fall prey to them.
So what are some of these destructive evils that we need to be on guard against?
He covers a lot of ground, but some of the most prominent ones include anger, greed, excessive sexual desire, pride, backbiting, excessive attachment to the world, the love of power and show.
Wow, that's a pretty comprehensive list. It sounds like he's touching on all the major human weaknesses.
He is. He's really trying to paint a full picture of the challenges we face on this path.
Okay, so let's start with anger. I mean, we all experience anger from time to time. How does Al-Ghazali distinguish between healthy anger and destructive anger?
It's a good question. He acknowledges that there are times when anger can be justified, even righteous anger, like when we see injustice or oppression. That kind of anger can motivate us to take action, to fight for what's right. But the kind of anger he warns against is the kind that consumes us, the kind that clouds our judgment and leads us to act in harmful ways.
So it's not about suppressing all anger, but recognizing when it's coming from a place of ego.
Exactly, from that reactive part of the nafs, and then finding healthier ways to manage it.
Okay, that makes sense. So what about greed? How does he define that?
Greed is that insatiable desire for more, that feeling that we'll never be satisfied with what we have.
Always wanting more, more, more.
Right. Always striving for the next thing. It can manifest as a relentless pursuit of wealth, possessions, status, even knowledge, but it always leaves us wanting more, never truly content.
Yeah, it's like that feeling of never having enough.
Exactly. And Al-Ghazali warns us against this trap. He reminds us that true wealth lies not in material possessions, but in our connection with God, in the richness of our inner world, and in the contentment that comes from living in alignment with our higher purpose.
Shifting our focus from external validation to internal fulfillment.
Beautifully said. It's about cultivating a sense of gratitude for what we have and recognizing that true happiness comes from within.
So we've talked about anger, greed. What about excessive sexual desire? That's a tricky one.
It is. It's a sensitive topic, but an important one to address. Al-Ghazali approaches it with nuance. He recognizes that sexual desire is a natural part of being human. But like any powerful force, it needs to be channeled appropriately.
Okay, so it's not about denying or suppressing those desires altogether. It's about finding a healthy balance.
Right, expressing them in a way that's aligned with our spiritual values. He emphasizes the importance of marriage as a sacred institution, a way to fulfill those desires in a halal and fulfilling way.
So finding that balance between enjoying those pleasures and not letting them control us.
Exactly, not letting them distract us from our higher purpose. And that brings us to pride.
Pride. How is pride a destructive evil?
Pride is that feeling of superiority, that need to be right, that tendency to look down on others, to take credit for things that are ultimately gifts from God.
So it's about recognizing our own limitations.
Yes. And remembering that everything we have, our talents, our blessings, ultimately comes from God. True confidence stems from a deep sense of self-worth, a sense of worthiness that's rooted in our connection with the divine, not from a need to prove ourselves superior to others.
Humility is so important.
It is. It allows us to see ourselves clearly, to acknowledge our strengths and our weaknesses, and to appreciate the unique gifts that others bring to the world.
Okay, so we've talked about anger, greed, excessive desire, and pride. What about backbiting? How does that fit into this?
Backbiting is a destructive evil that can really erode relationships and create disharmony. It's that tendency to talk about others behind their backs, to spread rumors or gossip, to tear them down in order to make ourselves feel better.
It's like a poison that spreads negativity.
Exactly. It undermines trust and creates division. Al-Ghazali uses a very powerful metaphor to describe backbiting. He compares it to eating the flesh of a dead brother.
Wow, that's a strong image.
It is. It really conveys the severity of this sin, the harm it inflicts, both on the speaker and the person being spoken about.
So it's a reminder to be mindful of our speech, to use our words to build up, not to tear down.
Precisely. To speak with kindness, with compassion, with understanding. And that brings us to another destructive force that can be particularly challenging in our modern world: excessive attachment to the world.
Excessive attachment to the world. What does that mean?
It doesn't mean we can't enjoy the blessings of this life, the beauty of creation, the love of family and friends, but it's about not letting those things become our primary focus.
Not letting them become our idols.
Exactly. Not letting them distract us from our spiritual journey. Our ultimate goal is to draw closer to God. And excessive attachment to the world can keep us tethered to our lower desires, preventing us from seeking higher truths.
So it's about finding that balance between enjoying the world and not letting it consume us.
Yes. Cultivating a sense of detachment, not from the world itself, but from those things that keep us bound to our ego, to our desires for power, status, possessions, those things that ultimately don't bring lasting happiness.
Okay, and finally, the love of power and show.
This is another insidious one. It's that insatiable desire for recognition, for status, for control over others.
Always wanting to be in charge.
Yeah.
To have the last word.
Exactly. It's the ego's way of seeking validation, asserting its dominance, but it ultimately leads to a sense of separation from God and from our true selves. True fulfillment comes from surrendering to God's will.
Recognizing that we're all interconnected, part of a greater whole.
Exactly. Our worthiness is inherent. It doesn't need to be proven through worldly achievements or positions of power.
So we've covered a lot of ground here, exploring all these different destructive evils that can hinder our spiritual progress. It can feel a little overwhelming to think about. Does al-Ghazali offer any solutions? What can we do to combat these negative forces and purify our souls?
That's the beauty of al-Ghazali's work. He doesn't just leave us with a list of problems. He offers us a path forward, a way to overcome these challenges and attain spiritual enlightenment.
Okay, tell me more about that.
He calls it riyada. It encompasses good conduct, spiritual discipline, and purification of the self. It's about actively cultivating those virtues and practices that align us with our higher selves.
So it's not just about avoiding the bad stuff, it's about actively doing good.
Exactly. It's a proactive approach to spiritual development, emphasizing the importance of transforming our inner world through conscious effort and mindful action. And that's what we'll be diving into next time. We'll explore those specific practices, virtues, and mindsets that al-Ghazali outlines for purifying the soul.
I'm looking forward to it. This has been a really eye-opening conversation. Thank you for sharing your insights with us.
You're welcome. It's been a pleasure exploring these deep topics with you.
And thank you to all our listeners for joining us on this episode of Echoes of Ihsan. We look forward to continuing this journey of spiritual discovery with you next time. Until then, may your hearts be filled with the light of Ihsan.